This looks really boring, but it isn't, honestly.
There you are.
I'm an academic, but I'm also an industrial designer, so hopefully it won't be too dry. I want to talk about something that I have defined as full-stack cognitive user experience design, and that is how we tie together what someone's thinking and doing with machine learning at the far end of the stack. I am a Professor of Digital Transformation Design at the University of Brighton and academic lead for Connected Futures, which includes digital health, immersive media, digital economy and smart cities. And how do I do all that? Because I'm a user experience designer. My first website and touchscreen was in 1994, and my first AI was in 1997. So I'm now ostensibly an expert in human-machine convergence, which is what I will be talking about in this presentation. Told you it wasn't boring. So yes, this is what brought what we do and what I do to public recognition. But there's nothing illegal in what went on here. The only illegal act in any of that was giving the data out of a research project, and this is something very close to my heart, into a commercial application. I sign non-disclosures all the time. I have to be compliant. I am not at liberty to use the data that I get through the university for commercial purposes. If I were, I'd probably be a lot richer. But the point is, that was the only law that was broken. When we come on to the adverts that drove a lot of the Brexit campaign, what the problem here is not an illegality, it's an ethical issue. I don't think I need to tell you that, when I read that strapline, I don't feel like that. I'm not xenophobic, I was brought up in a really global environment, I like people, I travel a lot. That doesn't work for me. That explicitly engenders xenophobia and pushes racism and hate crime. And a lot of my work is about trying to prove that that's what these things do. I wrote a paper in 2014, if you fancy a little heavy reading, and I suggested it. I gave the paper in Havana, and it was prior to the US Embassy's reopening, and I suggested that user experience design methods could have engineered the Arab Spring. And I didn't suggest who it might have been, but it gave me great pleasure to stand in Havana, of all places, and just perhaps imply who might have had a vested interest in the Arab Spring. So you can find that online if you want to read it. So for me, it's about the medium and the message. None of this is new. We've had propaganda, we've had advertising, and the difference now is that we don't have a top-down communication pipeline, distribution pipeline. We have an evolving ecosystem. So that's the only difference for me. As I said, advertising, propaganda, fake news, it's all the same thing. It's the relationship between how something's represented and what it actually is. In 1999, talking about the format within which messages are now distributed, a very important book came out by Karen Hayles, who suggested the possibility of downloading human consciousness to a computer and talked about how we become post-human and talked about cybernetics. At the time, that sounded like science fiction to many people. However, it is clearly now science fact. Just as our previous speakers touched upon, the volume of data that we're leaving in our daily behaviours is ostensibly the downloading of our consciousness to a computer for all intents and purposes. There's also many techniques that are commonplace in our industry, such as sentiment analysis, scraping data from open and closed systems to find out how people are feeling about things in real time in response to what they're consuming. So if you're using social media, I only use LinkedIn, but if you're using any sort of personal social media, you are sharing your personal information, you are breaching your own data protection, and that is publicly and free, and that's probably why it's only worth 48 pence or something, because you've already given it away. So in 2011, I gave a paper at the British Computer Society talking about the concept of a data exoskeleton. Again, it was difficult to communicate, even just 8 years ago, but I think we're all now very comfortable with the notion we are leaving a data exoskeleton in everything that we do across multiple touch points. And that's available online as well if you want to find it. And of course it translates into our daily experiences, such as personalisation. This can be helpful. I don't want to start again every time I go to Amazon. These assist my transactions. I don't like shopping. I do it because it gets me things. So I'm quite into the notion of tailored personalisation for many reasons. we've known for a long time that it's not just personal, it's social and cultural. So, for example, eBay Europe needs to run more slowly in Germany and Scandinavia than it does in the UK. In the UK, we want everything fast. The Germans don't want it if it's easy. The Germans and the Scandinavians, and I think you can tell this from the flat pack furniture export, actually, they like things to be a bit of a challenge. They like to feel they've achieved something. I don't. I'm British. I'm not a huge fan of IKEA. But this is what big data gives us. Am I allowed to say that? This is what big data gives us. It not only gives us incremental personal insights, it gives us social and cultural insights and subculture insights and user group insights. And then there are systems like OkCupid, which uses a lot of behavioural analytics, and a lot of my expertise are in and around behavioural analytics, and the system is engineered to create a relationship with the system. So I don't know if you're on there full of hope, but it's time to go. It is a very addictive system for a number of different reasons, and I'll touch on that as well. So for me, this all falls into what is actually correctly defined as a singularity. Now, you might have heard the phrase, and in popular culture it's understood as the point at which machines take over. It isn't the point at which machines take over. It's a technical phrase from physics, and it's a point at which infinity is reached. So it's the point at which you're learning from the machine, and the machine's learning from you, and the result is at a point of infinity. Now, just as an example, I wanted to ask, is anyone else old enough in the room to remember knowing phone numbers? Hooray! I'm not alone. Simultaneously, and this may just be me because I'm spooky and psychedelic, but does anybody now know who's texted before they pick up the phone? Please. One. Well, maybe I've been merging with my machines for a very long time. But theoretically, and this will not sound mad in 5 to 7 years like my other propositions, theoretically, we evolve as our machines evolve, which is another reason that robots won't take over the earth. We're evolving as the machines are evolving. So we're devolving basic cognitive memory tasks to our machines. We're accelerating the process. We're freeing up our RAM. We're freeing up our headspace to do other, more advanced things. Okay, so how do I do what I do? I have spent 10 years working with EEG and other biometrics to measure people's precognitive responses. So this is a bit like eye tracking, but on steroids. So if you use eye tracking in the development cycle now to show where people are looking and to improve your design, this shows how people are feeling. And it relates directly, actually, in a very tangible way, to branded user experience, because you need to keep the emotional engagement with the brand across multiple touch points. But it also gives you really deep insights into non-reported responses. Eye tracking is valuable because people are not saying, I'm looking over there. They're actually looking over there, and you're measuring an instinctive, precognitive, visceral response. I'm not interested in reported responses. Reported responses are socialised and therefore translated and therefore not of value to me in the development cycle. So I wire people up. It's okay, I'm a professor. I'm allowed to be slightly mad. So in 2010 I created a NeuroGame. And what was interesting about this was, instead of using the EEG to measure responses, I was using it as a natural interface to drive interaction. And the kits that came with, I was using Emotive, it cost £10,000 at the time. It's now about $800 if anyone wants to get one. But the kit that came with it allowed you to move a box or a lorry. And it was really difficult. I had one research student that could do it, used to give him a headache. And I thought, well, if moving a box or a lorry is difficult, what happens if we get them to move a balloon or a feather? And all the user experience designers in the room will know that moving the balloon and the feather was far easier than moving the box or the lorry. But there's no subject to this. The psychological implications of a balloon or a feather are not supposed to have quantifiable, measurable impact in how we interact with things. But in this context, they do. And I went on to think about, well, if it's easy to move a balloon and a feather, what if we move it down an optical illusion which already looks like it's moving? So that's what we did, and of course we got an exponential gain, and then you're in a true singularity because your brain thinks the item's moving, therefore the brain, because it's a brain-computer interface, it moves it more easily. So you're in union with your machine, and this is now 8 years ago for me. So I went on to look at nudging behaviours. Rather than selling more shoes or all the rest of it, I thought, what if we could intervene in stop smoking, in the smoking cessation user journey? The company I worked with at the time, the Stop Smoking app, just looked like the sort of thing you pull out of a box of tablets. And I said to Tim, have you ever smoked? No, thought not. Well, I have. And I know that all you want in that point of intervention is a cigarette. So that's the point of leverage. That's when we can change the behaviour. What are we going to put in there? Something that looks like a fag. And what can we do once we've got that emotional engagement with the pseudo fag? Well, the answer turned out to be we can do all sorts. And we did a load of measurement that demonstrated using the biometrics a greater degree of emotional engagement with the branded Stop Smoking app than the unbranded Stop Smoking app, and a 23% acceleration in the smoking cessation user journey. So this is now quantifiable data on the impact on behaviour of a brand. Am I running out of time? Then I worked with another company and we looked at mental health management for young people in the wake of the London riots. So I'm really just trying to make the case of what we can actually do with the skill set that we've got, given the luxury that I have, the amount of R&D I get to do. I also created a platform that engineered the online arts economy, and this was recently listed by Hiscox as only 3 behind Amazon Art. All I have to do is crack Bezos' income stream, and I'll be up there, won't I? But anyway, they're number 9. They're number 16, and we're number 19. And again, it was by designing the singularity within which people could accelerate their aims, and I harnessed the network effect. I found out that's what it's called. So again, it's about individual agency and engagement, and it's about group and social and cultural agency engagement, and mapping it and modelling it and accelerating what the users are interested in doing. I also created, I don't know what it is. I worked on a research project that showed that critical thinking was core to learning, and the outcomes of the research project with 3 universities across the world was that Faccioni's 6-stage model of critical thinking was the closest to what's required to learn. So I thought, well, if that's the outcome, why don't we build it? So I built a system that nudged people, and again using the biometrics to measure that they were in an alpha state and all the rest of it, to nudge people through 6 stages of critical thinking and to engineer learning. So I'm now engineering neuroplasticity, basically, in a quantifiable way. My current work is investigating the potential and the ethics of a cognitive singularity, which will be afforded by 5G once it gets fully off the ground and up and running. 5G gives us mobile edge computing, which means you've got a location and a context-aware potential for a human-centred network. It's what we used to call pervasive and ubiquitous computing, which means that everything around us is intelligent. So we're no longer just going through the screens, but the environment is reading our behaviour. And so the potential for machine learning of our behaviour to nudge the way we're acting is huge, it's vast. So I'm interested in putting the user in this context, in Internet of Things and in a 5G-enabled environment, putting the user in the fog. I don't know if you've heard of the fog. It's the new cloud. So it's not over there in a cloud, it's all around you in a fog, because we've got localised computing and processing power. So theoretically, our daily activities can be read across multiple touch points. The implicit information about our behaviour can then be inferred, and we can get real-time analytics and data-driven cognitive UX to manage our behaviours. So this is a dystopian nightmare, unless, of course, you come to my workshop. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Unless, of course, we intervene in an ethical manner. You could read the face. So what I'm working on is being able to measure engagement, nudge, persuasion, coercion and addiction in interactive touch points. And I'm half joking about the workshop actually, because I've got a set of methodologies that allow us to capture and model and translate and engineer what would we call it, value-driven behaviour in the end users. So we do really need to use this not to sell more shoes. And back to, there are decisions from individual designers, but there are also policy decisions. And I'm a government advisor, and a thought that came to me earlier. What if we had a chartered society for experienced engineers? And you could be signed up like a chartered surveyor to say, I practice ethically, I don't work for your Viagogo. This is my example of very poor practice. So there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of risk, but there's a lot of potential. And personally, I am confident that we can engineer a healthy human-machine convergence for our future. And I am, for the first time ever, going to be very commercially minded and plug the Behaviour and Design Conference that Tech Circus are running and the workshop that I'm running off the back of it, where I share some of these methodologies. Thank you.